At 18, after being deemed a burden by her own family, a young woman is sold for 2 goats and a sack of grain to a sheikh feared in circulating stories. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post daily, continuing. The sun was setting over Riverbend Valley when Marina received the news. Sitting on the worn porch of the small unfinished brick house, she watched the rolling hills that surrounded the rural village where she had grown up. 23 years of existence confined to that small territory between the river and the dirt road. She had never imagined her fate would be sealed on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, while cicadas announced the arrival of night. "It's decided," announced Mr. Arthur, her father, in that rough voice of someone chewing words along with tobacco. He didn't even look her in the eye. "It's come to this. You're going." Marina felt her stomach sink. She knew that tone. It was the same one he had used when he sold the family's last good piece of land, when he gambled away the harvest money, when her mother left after years of silent violence. It was the tone of irrevocable decisions. "Going where, father?" "To the Colonel's mansion. We've settled everything. The debt we owe him, well, he agreed to a deal." The words hung in the air like birds of ill omen. Marina felt her blood run cold. The debt, the one that had grown like a weed over the years, fed by the loans her father had taken out with Augustus Maxwell, known as the Colonel, a nickname he carried not for military rank, but for the power he wielded over the valley and its inhabitants. Owner of the region's only mill, half the arable land, and, according to gossip, also some local authorities. "What kind of deal?" Marina asked, though she feared the answer. "You'll work there as a housekeeper." The hesitation in his voice betrayed the lie. "Until the debt is paid." "For how long?" Mr. Arthur looked away towards the horizon, where the lights of the Colonel's mansion began to stand out against the darkening sky. That imposing structure, isolated on top of the hill which everyone called the fortress. "As long as it takes." Marina felt the weight of those words. She wasn't foolish. She knew what happened to young women who went to work at the Colonel's house. Stories ran like water through the valley. Some returned with money and empty eyes. Others simply didn't return. "I won't go." Her voice came out firmer than she expected. "Yes, you will." Her father finally faced her. "Or would you prefer that you and your siblings be evicted? That we lose the little we have left? That I end up in jail for defaulting? The Colonel can do all that in the snap of a finger." Marina looked inside the house where her younger siblings played, oblivious to the fate unfolding. Sebastian, 9 years old, and Laura, just 7. Motherless and practically fatherless, they had always depended on her. "When?" was all she could ask. "Tomorrow morning. His driver will pick you up at 6. The night was long and sleepless. Marina packed a small suitcase with her few possessions, some simple clothes, the necklace that had been her mother's, an old notebook where she wrote her thoughts. She sat beside her sleeping siblings' beds and allowed herself to cry in silence. At dawn, the black car was already parked in front of the house. It wasn't the usual driver, one of those who took temporary maids. It was Renwick Maxwell, the Colonel's right-hand man, his cousin's son, a tall, silent man whose stories of cruelty preceded him. "Time to go," he said simply, without greeting anyone. Marina hugged her siblings, who cried without fully understanding what was happening. Mr. Arthur remained distant, leaning against the wall, avoiding her gaze. There was no hug, no words of comfort or promises of reunion, only the palpable weight of guilt in the air. "For how much?" Marina asked her father when she was already at the door. "What?" He seemed confused. "For how much did you sell me?" The question hit him like a slap. His face reddened, a mixture of shame and anger. £50,000 and the forgiveness of the entire debt," he replied through clenched teeth. "More than you're worth." Marina felt those words like open wounds. £50,000. That was her price. Less than a down payment on a used car. Less than her father had already lost gambling in a single night. The journey to the Colonel's mansion was silent. Renwick drove, concentrating, ignoring her presence. As they ascended the winding road to the estate, Marina felt the weight of the world grow on her shoulders. The mansion, once just a distant vision, now revealed itself in all its grandeur. A colonial-style building, preserved and modernized, surrounded by high walls and an ostentatious security system. "This is where my freedom dies," Marina thought, swallowing her tears. The gates opened automatically, revealing impeccably manicured gardens. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, and Renwick finally broke the silence. "Get your suitcase. I'll take you to Helga, the head housekeeper. She'll explain your duties." His voice was neutral, devoid of emotion. "One thing. Do not look directly at the colonel unless he permits it. Do not speak unless you are questioned. Do not attempt to use the phone or internet without authorization. The consequences would be unpleasant." The interior of the mansion was a violent contrast to everything Marina knew. Marble floors, works of art, furniture that seemed straight out of a period film. Renwick led her through extensive corridors until they reached the service area, still luxurious, but clearly separated from the rest of the house. Helga was a middle-aged woman of German descent, with cold eyes and a rigid posture. She examined Marina from head to toe like someone evaluating a defective product. Not what I expected. Her English had a distinct accent. "Too thin, but she'll do." Marina felt like cattle at an auction. She lowered her eyes, swallowing her indignation. "Your duties will be simple at first," Helga continued. "Cleaning the colonel's private quarters, serving his meals when requested, organizing his personal documents, other tasks he may determine." The hesitation in the word tasks made Marina shiver. "Your room is here." Helga pointed to a door at the end of the service area corridor. "It's small, but it has a private bathroom. A luxury the others don't have." The room was, in fact, small but surprisingly comfortable. A single bed, a wardrobe, a simple desk, a window overlooking the back of the property. "Dress appropriately." Helga handed her a simple but fine fabric grey uniform. "The colonel will see you at dinner." Alone, finally, Marina allowed herself to collapse onto the bed and cry openly. The tears, however, dried quickly. In their place came a cold determination. She would survive. For her siblings, for herself. The hours leading up to dinner passed in a blur. Helga showed her the mansion, explaining rules and procedures with military rigidity. The house was even more extensive than it seemed. Besides the main building, there were annexes, an indoor pool, an underground cellar, stables at the back of the property. "The colonel rarely receives visitors," Helga explained. "He prefers seclusion, since his wife passed away 5 years ago. Only a few business associates occasionally, and his daughter who lives abroad." Marina nodded, absorbing the information like someone memorizing the rules of a dangerous game. "At 8 sharp," Helga called her. "He awaits you in the dining room. Remember, eyes down, short answers." The dining room was opulent, with a table that could easily seat 20 people. However, only one place was set at the head, and there he was, Augustus Maxwell, the colonel. Marina had only glimpsed him a few times in town, always from a distance. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall, with neatly trimmed grey hair, a physique maintained despite his 60 years, penetrating grey eyes. He dressed with discreet elegance that denoted power without ostentation. "Approach." His voice was deep, controlled. Marina obeyed, keeping her eyes down as instructed. "Look at me." She hesitated, remembering Renwick's warning, but slowly raised her gaze. His eyes examined her with curiosity, not with the lust she had feared, but with something that seemed recognition. "What is your full name?" "Marina Ribeiro da Silva, sir." "Age?" 23. "Education?" The question surprised her. "High school graduate. I started a literature degree, but I had to drop out in the first year." Something gleamed in his eyes. "Interest? Why?" "I needed to take care of my siblings after my mother left." The colonel nodded thoughtfully. "Helga said you read and write well. That's rare around here." "I like books, sir." A near smile crossed his lips, so quickly that Marina thought she had imagined it. "Sit." He pointed to a chair to his right. Marina's eyes widened, confused. "Sir?" "Sit down for dinner." "I do not intend to interrogate you while you stand like an accused." Hesitantly, she sat down. An employee immediately appeared, placing a plate and cutlery in front of her. Dinner proceeded in awkward silence. The food was better than anything Marina had ever tasted, but each mouthful was an effort. Such was her tension. She expected at any moment for the true nature of that negotiation to reveal itself. "You wonder why you are here?" It wasn't a question. Marina remained silent. "Your father is a fool and irresponsible," he continued. But you are not guilty of his mistakes. She looked up, surprised. Then why did you— Buy me? The word came out, more bitterly than she intended. The colonel did not seem offended. Precisely because you do not deserve to pay for his mistakes. He took a sip of wine. And because I need someone with your qualities. What qualities, sir? Intelligence, dignity, the ability to read more than words. She frowned, confused. Your duties here will not be of an intimate nature if that is what you fear, he said casually as if discussing the weather. I need someone to organize my personal documents, letters, manuscripts, a kind of private archivist. Marina tried to hide the relief she felt, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Why me? Because I know you frequented the town library. I know you wrote for the local newspaper before it closed. And I know that unlike most in that village, you see beyond the valley. Marina felt a shiver. He had observed her, studied her habits without her ever noticing. How long? Will I stay here? As long as the work requires. A year, perhaps more. And then? Then you will be free to go. With a recommendation from me should your work be satisfactory. The rest of dinner passed in silence. At the end he stood up. Rest today. Tomorrow Helga will show you my office and the library, where you will spend most of your time. Before she could answer, he left, leaving her alone with swirling thoughts. Back in her room, Marina lay down exhausted, but sleep did not come. This man was not what she expected. What did he really want? Why the interest in her documents, and why her specifically? The night brought a violent storm, common at that time of year. Marina watched the lightning from the window when she heard a noise. The door opened slowly. Her heart pounded. Was this it? The true intention finally revealing itself. But it was just Helga carrying a package. From the colonel. She handed her the bundle with a neutral expression. Marina opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were 3 books. A rare edition of The Devil to Pay in the Backlands by Guimarães Rosa, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and a blank leather-bound journal. A note accompanied the gift, For Sleepless Nights AM. Confused, Marina touched the books, feeling the quality paper, the characteristic smell. It was a valuable gift carefully chosen. Why? The next morning, after a solitary breakfast, the colonel rarely appeared before noon, according to Helga, Marina was led to the mansion's library. The room was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, thousands of volumes methodically organized, leather armchairs, a fireplace. The colonel's office is there. Helga pointed to a side door. He works there in the morning. In the afternoon, he usually stays here. You will organize the documents in that room. She pointed to a smaller door at the other end. These are personal documents. Diaries, letters, photographs. Some are over 100 years old. The history of the Maxwell family. He wants everything catalogued, digitized, and organized chronologically. Marina nodded, beginning to understand the nature of her work. The document room was smaller but equally impressive. Old maps, time-yellowed letters, black and white photographs, leather-bound diaries. Why does he want this organized now? Marina asked. The colonel is writing a book, Helga replied without elaborating. He will personally give you more detailed instructions soon. Alone, Marina began to examine the documents. They were, in fact, fascinating. Records of the Maxwell family since the days of the Empire, when the colonel's first ancestor arrived in the valley. There were correspondences with important politicians, records of land acquisition, photographs of weddings and births. Immersed in the documents, Marina barely noticed the hours passing. The work, though meticulous, was exactly the kind of thing that interested her. For a moment, she almost forgot her situation. A soft cough brought her back to reality. The colonel stood at the door observing her. I see you've already started. His voice was softer than the night before. Yes, sir. It's fascinating. A brief smile crossed his lips. Most would find it tedious. History is never tedious, sir, especially when it's real. The colonel entered the room, approaching to examine what she was looking at. A photograph of an austere man beside a young woman with a sad gaze. My grandfather and grandmother, he explained. Arranged marriage. She was 16. He 42. She looks unhappy. She was. The colonel seemed thoughtful. A marriage of convenience, like so many others in that era. And in our era too, in different ways. Marina felt there was something personal in that comment. There are letters from her in that box. He pointed to an intricately carved wooden box on a table. Letters she never sent to the man she truly loved. Why show me this, sir? The colonel looked directly at her. Because I want you to understand why this work is important to me. It's not just about cataloguing the past. It's about understanding it, about breaking cycles. There was a moment of dense silence between them. The books, Marina began hesitantly. Thank you. He nodded, an almost imperceptible movement. I read that you appreciated them. Consider them a tool for the job. With that he left, leaving Marina again alone with the documents and with increasingly larger questions about the man who had bought her. The following days established a surprisingly calm routine. Marina worked in the archives in the morning, usually lunched alone, sometimes in Renwick's silent company, who now treated her with distant respect, and continued her work in the afternoon. Occasionally, the colonel would appear to check on her progress or to explain some detail about the documents. These interactions, initially tense, gradually became more natural. He seemed genuinely interested in her observations about the historical records. A week after her arrival, during one of these conversations, he surprised her with a personal question. Do you miss your siblings? The question hit Marina like a punch. Of course she did. She thought of them constantly, worried, wondering if they were well cared for if they felt her absence. Yes, sir. Very much. He nodded thoughtfully. Would you like to see them? Marina looked up, sudden hope clutching her chest. Could I? I've arranged for them to visit you on Sunday. If you wish. The surprise left her momentarily speechless. Why? Why would you do that? The colonel looked directly at her, something indefinable in his gaze. Because I am not a monster, Marina. Contrary to what they say in the valley. With that he left, leaving her with a disconcerting feeling. That man who had bought her freedom like one buys merchandise now offered her an unexpected gesture of kindness. On Sunday, as promised, Sebastian and Laura arrived, brought by Renwick himself. The reunion was emotional. The little ones ran into their sister's arms, crying and laughing simultaneously. The colonel, surprisingly, offered them the garden and the pool to spend the day. He remained distant, occasionally observing from the veranda, but leaving them at ease. Is he mean to you? Sebastian asked when they were alone by the pool. No, Seb, he's different from what we imagined. Father said you're never coming back, Laura murmured, clinging to her sister's arm. That's not true, little one. I will come back, and in the meantime you can visit me. The afternoon passed too quickly. When it was time to leave, the little ones cried again. Marina felt her heart break, but there was something different now, the certainty that she would see them again. Renwick, as he took them back, did something unexpected. He handed her a mobile phone. From the colonel, he said simply. So you can talk to them whenever you want. That night, after dinner, now a regular meal with the colonel, though still marked by long silences, Marina found the courage to ask what she really wanted to know. Why are you being kind to me? The colonel studied her for a moment before replying. Perhaps because I see in you what was lacking in so many others. What exactly? Dignity. Despite the circumstances. There was a silence, then he continued. Do you know why people call me the colonel? Because you have power, money. No. He took a sip of wine. Because my father was called that, and his father before him. It's an inheritance, like this house, like the lands. An inheritance of power over others, of decisions over other people's lives. He paused, his eyes lost in some distant point. An inheritance I never wanted. Marina felt something shift between them at that moment, as if a curtain had been partially opened, revealing not the monster she expected to find, but a complex man, carrying the weight of his own name. As she stood to leave, he said, almost as if a thought escaped. Some are born in gardens, but are treated as weeds. Others like you, Marina, are flowers that simply grew in the wrong soil. Those words echoed in Marina's mind as she walked back to her room. She looked at the moon through the window, the same star her siblings would see from the valley, and for the first time since she arrived, she felt something beyond fear and resignation. She couldn't name that feeling, but it warmed her chest like a small flame, stubbornly lit against all winds. Weeks turned into months. Autumn gave way to winter, bringing dense fogs that embraced the mansion in the early hours of the morning, isolating it even further from the rest of the world. Marina felt as if she lived in a parallel reality, suspended between the past in the valley and an uncertain future. Work in the archives progressed. Each organized document revealed more layers of the complex history of the Maxwells. More than simple, prosperous landowners, they had been fundamental pieces in local politics for generations. There were records of obscure agreements, favors exchanged, lands acquired by questionable means. Found anything interesting? The colonel asked one morning, silently entering the document room. Marina was focused on a folder of correspondence from the 1940s. Your grandfather seems to have played an important role in state politics, she replied, without looking up from the papers. The initial formality between them had softened over time. But there are gaps, correspondences that begin abruptly, as if earlier letters are missing. The colonel approached, examining the documents over her shoulder. Marina felt his discreet perfume, a mixture of woods and tobacco, and something strange happened in her stomach, a jolt that caught her off guard. Some letters were destroyed, he commented. My father had fears that certain family matters might come to light. What matters? He stared at her for a moment, as if assessing how much he could trust her. The true origin of the Maxwell fortune. Marina waited, expectant. She had learned that silence was often the best stimulus for him to continue. The first Augustus Maxwell, my great-grandfather and namesake, was not the prosperous landowner that official history tells. He was a merchant of runaway slaves. He captured those seeking freedom and returned them to their masters for rewards or resold them. Marina felt a shiver. How do you know this? There are no records. There is a diary. The only copy is in that strongbox. He pointed to a built-in safe in the wall which Marina had never seen open. My father wanted to burn it. I stopped him. Why? Because forgetting the past doesn't erase it. His voice had an unusual intensity. The fortune I inherited, this mansion, the power over the valley, it all began with blood and suffering. To ignore that would be another form of cruelty. Marina observed him with new eyes. There was a vulnerability there, a heavy conscience she didn't expect to find. Is that why you're writing the book? To reveal the truth? To confront it, at least, he sighed. Some truths shouldn't be public. They would destroy innocent lives today. Others need to be faced, at least by me. There was a moment of silence between them, charged with something indefinable. Then, surprising her, he lightly touched her shoulder. I'd like you to read the manuscript, what I've written so far. Marina felt disconcerted by the request, a trust she didn't expect. Why me? Because you have eyes that see beyond words. That night in her room, Marina pored over the manuscript the colonel had given her. It was about 200 pages of a narrative that blended memory, history, and reflection. The writing was surprisingly good, elegant, direct, at times poetic. It told the story of the Maxwells with painful honesty, sparing no one, including the author himself. One passage in particular caught her attention. I inherited not just land and fortune, but a way of existing in the world, as someone who makes decisions about the lives of others. Like my father, and his father before him, I grew up believing this was the natural right of the Maxwells. The right to buy loyalties, to bend other people's wills, to possess not just things but people. It took me decades to realize the prison that this inheritance represented, how much it isolated me from true humanity, transforming me into a cog in a system that operates through fear. Marina closed the manuscript, disturbed. These were not the words of the cold, calculating man everyone feared in the valley. These were confessions of someone torn between the legacy he had received and the person he perhaps wished to be. The next morning, she found the colonel in the library. He stood by the window watching the fog covering the gardens, a solitary silhouette against the diffuse light. I read the manuscript, she said. He turned slowly. And? It's honest. Perhaps more honest than the valley is prepared to hear. A brief smile crossed his lips. Too brutal. Necessary. Marina took a deep breath. But there are parts about your wife. It seems you're avoiding something there. The mention of his deceased wife changed something in his expression. A shadow crossed his eyes. Helen? He pronounced the name like someone touching an old wound. How you are perceptive. There's much I haven't been able to write about her. Why? Because the truth about our marriage is the hardest part of my story. He paused as if gathering courage. She didn't love me. She married me for the same reason so many women married Maxwells before, by arrangement, by convenience, for lack of better options. I knew this, and yet I kept her bound to me for 20 years. Was she unhappy? At first, yes. Then she found solace in other arms. Marina felt an unexpected pang of compassion. And you? Me? I loved her in my own distorted, possessive, controlling way. His voice was heavy with old bitterness. When I found out about her lover, I could have done what my father would have done, swift, bloody revenge. Instead, I pretended not to know. For years, for her, for our daughter, and mostly for myself, because confronting it would mean admitting my failure as a man. Marina moved closer, driven by an impulse she couldn't name. What happened to her? Cancer. Fast, relentless. She died in my arms, asking forgiveness for something I had already forgiven, but never had the courage to say. He looked back out the window. On the night of the funeral, I burned this entire library. Every book, every document. Renwick stopped me from destroying the house, too. The confession took Marina by surprise. She looked around at the filled bookshelves, but the books, they were all replaced. Identical where possible, a meticulous reconstruction, as if nothing had happened. He smiled without humor. The Maxwells have always been good at erasing tracks. Something shifted between them at that moment. An invisible barrier crumbled. Marina saw for the first time not the Colonel, but Augustus, a man carrying scars he had chosen to keep private from the world. In the following weeks, their relationship acquired a new quality. Conversations about documents and the manuscript often drifted to personal topics. Marina spoke of her interrupted dreams of graduating, of writing. He spoke of travels, books, his daughter who studied in Europe and rarely returned. Sundays with her siblings became a ritual. Sebastian and Laura now eagerly awaited these meetings. Surprisingly, they developed an affection for Uncle Augustus, as they began to call the Colonel, who occasionally joined them for lunch or a walk in the gardens. It was during one of these Sundays, watching him teach Sebastian to play chess, that Marina realized the transformation that had occurred. The feared man of the valley, who had bought her as merchandise, had become, what, not a friend exactly, nor an ordinary employer, something indefinable, that made her heart race when he entered a room, that made her hands slightly tremble when their fingers touched exchanging documents. "What are you doing to me?" she thought, disturbed, moving away to the kitchen with the excuse of getting refreshments. There she found Helga, who watched her with a curious expression. "You look like her," the housekeeper said abruptly. "Like whom?" "Like Helen, not physically, but in spirit. The same strength, the same dignity." Marina didn't know how to respond. The comparison to the Colonel's deceased wife made her uncomfortable. "He's changing," Helga continued, more to herself than to Marina. "Becoming the man he was before everything." Before Marina could question the meaning of those words, she heard Laura's laughter echoing from the garden, calling her. That night, after the little ones had left, Marina found Augustus in the library. He was sitting in a leather armchair, an untouched glass of whiskey on the table beside him, his gaze lost in the flames of the fireplace. "May I?" she asked hesitantly. He nodded, indicating the opposite armchair. "Your siblings are special children," he commented after a moment of silence. "They have your strength. They had to be strong. After our mother left, she passed away." Marina hesitated. "No, she left. She just couldn't take it anymore." Augustus watched her intently. "Do you blame her?" "No." Marina was surprised by her own answer. "For a long time I did. Now I understand she did what she needed to survive. And you stayed behind, taking on responsibilities that weren't yours. Someone needed to take care of them. And your father too, I imagine." Marina looked away. "My father is complicated. Your father is a weak man who hides behind violence and intimidation." His voice had a harsh tone he hadn't directed at her in a long time. "I know the type well. I saw what he did to you. What did he do to me? He taught you that your worth could be measured in money, that you were expendable, replaceable." He leaned forward. "And yet you remain whole. That is extraordinary." Marina felt her face burn under his intense gaze. I'm not sure I'm so whole. You are. There was an unwavering certainty in his voice. That's why I can't finish the book. What do you mean? Augustus stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the night was clear, starry. I started writing to exercise the past, to confront. The Maxwell legacy, he turned to face her. But then you arrived and something changed. I realized I don't just want to understand the past. I want to build a different future. The air between them seemed charged with electricity. Marina felt they were on the verge of something dangerous, irreversible. Augustus. It was the first time she had used his name like that, directly without the title. He closed his eyes briefly, as if the sound of his name on her lips caused physical pain. I know what you're thinking, he said, his voice controlled. That I'm too old, that I'm the man who bought you, that there's an insurmountable abyss between us. It's not that. Marina stood up too, feeling an unexpected courage. I'm thinking that I don't know who I am anymore since I came here. That when I'm near you, I feel things I never thought I'd feel for someone like you. Someone like me, he repeated the words slowly. The Colonel, the monster of the valley. No, she took a step towards him. The man who showed me that I can be more than the circumstances that brought me here. There was a moment of absolute silence between them, where only the crackle of the fireplace and the sound of their breathing were audible. Then slowly, as if fearing she might vanish at any touch, Augustus raised his hand and touched her face. The contact was electric. Marina closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of that rough palm against her skin. When she opened them again, he was closer, his grey eyes reflecting the fireplace flames and something else, an inner fire. Restrained but undeniably present. This is madness, she whispered. Probably, his voice was a husky murmur. If you want me to stop, just say so. Marina knew she should say it. That there were 1,000 reasons to interrupt that moment, to retreat, to keep the safe walls between them. Instead, moved by an impulse that came from somewhere beyond reason, she moved even closer and touched her lips to his. The kiss began gentle, hesitant, like a question. Then something broke between them, a dam of containment, of doubt, and the kiss became deep, urgent. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. Hers tangled in his grey hair. There was desperation in that contact, as if both feared that reality might intrude at any moment, tearing them from that shared dream. When they finally separated, breathless, Marina saw on his face an expression she had never witnessed, pure vulnerability, without masks or defenses. This changes everything, he said simply. She nodded, unable to find adequate words for the turmoil in her chest. Augustus stepped back, creating a respectful distance between them. I will do nothing you do not wish. I am not my father nor my grandfather. I will not take what is not freely given. Marina then understood what differentiated him from the Maxwells who came before. Not the money, not the power, but this ability to see beyond possession, to respect boundaries, to see people where others saw only objects. I need time, she said finally, to understand this. He nodded, accepting. Time is what we have. In the days that followed, there was a different tension between them. Not unpleasant, but charged with unspoken possibilities, with glances that lasted a second longer, with hands that occasionally touched and lingered beyond what was necessary. Work in the archives continued, but now with a new dimension. Augustus frequently joined her, sharing stories behind the documents, revealing connections between past and present that she couldn't have discovered alone. One afternoon, while organizing old photographs, he showed her one in particular, a young man with a serious expression, in a military uniform. My father, he explained, before inheriting the title of the Colonel, before becoming the man the valley feared. Marina studied the photograph. There was something in the young man's gaze that reminded her of Augustus, but it lacked that depth, that humanity she now recognized in his son's eyes. He looks determined. Ruthless would be the word. Augustus carefully put the photo away. He fought in the 1932 revolution. He came back different, harder, colder. He said he had seen enough blood to understand that in country name, there were only two types of men, those who commanded and those who obeyed. And he chose to command. It wasn't really a choice. It was the path his whole life pointed to. Augustus picked up another photograph, this one of a young woman with a baby in her arms. My mother died when I was 5. After that, I was raised by my father's rigidity and the silence of the employees who feared him. Marina realized how much that childhood explained about the man he had become, both the side the valley knew and the one she was now discovering. How did you escape becoming exactly like him? Augustus reflected for a moment. I didn't escape, not completely. For years I followed in his footsteps. I amplified his fortune. I extended our influence. I married not for love, but because it was expected. He paused. Then Helen fell ill and everything changed. Seeing someone who spent her life under your power wither day after day, carrying unspoken regrets, that made me question everything. Marina imagined the scene, the powerful colonel, powerless before death, unable to control the one element that had always equaled rich and poor. That's when you started the book. That's when I started trying to be a different person. He looked directly at her. A work still in progress. There was something in that confession that touched Marina deeply. The honesty of that man, his willingness to confront his flaws was rare, especially among those who held power. That night, after dinner, a violent storm broke over the region. Lightning cut across the sky, followed by deafening thunder that made the mansion windows tremble. Marina was in her room, reading by the light of a bedside lamp, when she heard a particularly loud crash followed by sudden darkness. The power had been cut. Moments later, she heard a soft knock at the door. It was Renwick, holding a lantern. "The colonel asked me to check if you're all right," he said, handing her the lantern and some extra candles. "The storm has brought down the main lines. The generator is only working for the essential areas of the house. I'm fine, thank you." Marina accepted the lantern, noticing something different in Renwick's usually neutral expression. "Is everything all right?" He hesitated, looking into the empty corridor. "Marina." It was rare to hear him use her first name. "I have served the Maxwell family for 3 decades. I saw his father destroy lives on a whim. I saw the colonel himself, in his harsher years, do things he regrets today." Marina waited, sensing there was more to come. "I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Renwick's voice was low, almost inaudible beneath the storm's roar. "Not Helen, not anyone. Why are you telling me this?" "Because there are those who do not look kindly on what is happening between you two." Renwick seemed uncomfortable, but determined. "Your father has been talking in town, creating stories, saying that the colonel keeps you as, well, you can imagine." Marina felt her blood run cold. "My father, he showed up 2 weeks ago, drunk, demanding more money. He said the colonel should pay the fair price for you." Disgust was evident in Renwick's voice. "The colonel threw him out, of course, but the story spread, and now there are others listening to these stories. Important people in town, politicians, the prosecutor. Are you saying we're being investigated?" "I'm saying be careful." Renwick adjusted his posture, resuming his usual formality. "This region has a long memory, and the Maxwells have many enemies just waiting for an opportunity." With these enigmatic words, he left, leaving Marina with more questions than answers. The storm continued to rage through the night. Marina, unable to sleep, found herself wandering the darkened corridors of the mansion, guided only by the flickering light of the lantern. Without planning, her steps led her to the library. The door was ajar, a faint light visible inside. She hesitated, then gently pushed the door open. Augustus was there, sitting by the lit fireplace, the only source of light in the room now. He looked up as she entered, but didn't seem surprised. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Marina shook her head, approaching to sit in the armchair next to his. For a moment they watched the dancing flames together, the only sound besides the storm outside. "Renwick told me about my father," she said finally. "About the stories he's spreading." Augustus sighed. "I was going to tell you. I didn't want to worry you." "What exactly is he saying?" "Sardi, that I keep you here against your will. That I brought you not to work, but for—" He didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. Marina felt a rising anger. "And people believe that. And some do. It's easier to believe the worst about me than to accept that I might have changed." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a statement of fact. "What happens now?" Augustus studied her for a moment, his face partially illuminated by the fire, shadows dancing over his features. That depends on you, he said finally. I can take you back to the valley tomorrow if you wish. I will pay you enough to start over somewhere else, with your siblings, away from these rumors, this history. The offer surprised Marina. It was everything she thought she wanted when she arrived at that house months ago. Freedom, independence, a new beginning. Is that what you want? For me to leave? What I want and what's best for you might be different things. There was resignation in his voice. Marina reflected for a long moment. She thought of her siblings, of the valley, of the life she could build far from there. Then she thought of the man in front of her, complex, imperfect, carrying the weight of generations but genuinely seeking redemption. What if I don't want to go? She asked finally. His eyes met hers in the dim light. Then we have a bigger problem, because the world out there won't easily accept whatever is happening between us. And what is happening between us, Augustus? He reached out, lightly touching her hand, a delicate, almost reverent gesture. Something I never expected to find at this point in my life, something that makes me question everything I thought I knew about myself. The sincerity of those words struck her deeply. Marina intertwined her fingers with his. I won't let stories invented by a bitter man decide my fate, she said, with a firmness that surprised them both. Not now. Not when I'm finally discovering who I can be. A particularly loud thunderclap shook the mansion, as if the sky itself responded to her determination. Marina, there was a warning in his voice. The people who believe these stories have power. They can make our lives very difficult. More difficult than my life already was in the valley. More difficult than yours. Carrying the weight of a name you didn't choose? She moved closer, her face now inches from his. I have lived according to the expectations and limits imposed by others for as long as I can remember. I won't let them continue to define who I am or what I can feel. His expression changed, something like admiration and disbelief mingling in his gaze. You are extraordinary, he whispered. No, Marina smiled slightly. I'm just someone who finally found the right soil to bloom. Without another word, she closed the distance between them, kissing him with a certainty she didn't possess the first time. Her arms wrapped around him, pulling him closer. She felt his hands on her back, hesitant at first, then firmer, more possessive. When they finally separated, breathless, Marina saw on his face an expression she had never witnessed, pure vulnerability, without masks or defenses. This changes everything, he said simply. She nodded, unable to find adequate words for the turmoil in her chest. Augustus took a step back, creating a respectful distance between them. I will do nothing you do not wish. I am not my father nor my grandfather. I will not take what is not freely given. Marina then understood what differentiated him from the Maxwells who came before. Not the money, not the power, but this ability to see beyond possession, to respect boundaries, to see people where others saw only objects. I need time, she said finally, to understand this. He nodded, accepting. Time is what we have. In the days that followed, there was a different tension between them, not unpleasant, but charged with unspoken possibilities, with glances that lasted a second longer, with hands that occasionally touched and lingered beyond what was necessary. Work in the archives continued, but now with a new dimension. Augustus frequently joined her, sharing stories behind the documents, revealing connections between past and present that she couldn't have discovered alone. One afternoon, while organizing old photographs, he showed her one in particular, a young man with a serious expression, in a military uniform. My father, he explained, before inheriting the title of the colonel, before becoming the man the valley feared. Marina studied the photograph. There was something in the young man's gaze that reminded her of Augustus, but it lacked that depth. That humanity she now recognized in his son's eyes. He looks determined. Ruthless would be the word. Augustus carefully put the photo away. He fought in the 1932 revolution. He came back different, harder, colder. He said he had seen enough blood to understand that in country name, there were only two types of men, those who commanded and those who obeyed. And he chose to command. It wasn't really a choice. It was the path his whole life pointed to. Augustus picked up another photograph, this one of a young woman with a baby in her arms. My mother died when I was 5. After that, I was raised by my father's rigidity and the silence of the employees who feared him. Marina realized how much that childhood explained about the man he had become, both the side the valley knew and the one she was now discovering. How did you escape becoming exactly like him? Augustus reflected for a moment. I didn't escape, not completely. For years I followed in his footsteps. I amplified his fortune. I extended our influence. I married not for love, but because it was expected. He paused. Then Helen fell ill and everything changed. Seeing someone who spent her life under your power withered day after day, carrying unspoken regrets. That made me question everything. Marina imagined the scene, the powerful colonel powerless before death, unable to control the one element that had always equaled rich and poor. That's when you started the book. That's when I started trying to be a different person. He looked directly at her. A work still in progress. There was something in that confession that touched Marina deeply. The honesty of that man, his willingness to confront his flaws, was rare, especially among those who held power. That night after dinner, a violent storm broke over the region. Lightning cut across the sky, followed by deafening thunder that made the mansion windows tremble. Marina was in her room, reading by the light of a bedside lamp, when she heard a particularly loud crash, followed by sudden darkness. The power had been cut. Moments later, she heard a soft knock at the door. It was Renwick, holding a lantern. The colonel asked me to check if you're all right, he said, handing her the lantern and some extra candles. The storm has brought down the main lines. The generator is only working for the essential areas of the house. I'm fine, thank you. Marina accepted the lantern, noticing something different in Renwick's usually neutral expression. Is everything all right? He hesitated, looking into the empty corridor. Marina. It was rare to hear him use her first name. I have served the Maxwell family for 3 decades. I saw his father destroy lives on a whim. I saw the colonel himself, in his harsher years, do things he regrets today. Marina waited, sensing there was more to come. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Renwick's voice was low, almost inaudible beneath the storm's roar. Not Helen, not anyone. Why are you telling me this? Because there are those who do not look kindly on what is happening between you two. Renwick seemed uncomfortable, but determined. Your father has been talking in town, creating stories, saying that the colonel keeps you as, well, you can imagine. Marina felt her blood run cold. My father. He showed up 2 weeks ago, drunk, demanding more money. He said the colonel should pay the fair price for you. Disgust was evident in Renwick's voice. The colonel threw him out, of course. But the stories spread, and now there are others listening to these stories. Important people in town, politicians, the prosecutor. Are you saying we're being investigated? I'm saying be careful. Renwick adjusted his posture, resuming his usual formality. This region has a long memory, and the Maxwells have many enemies just waiting for an opportunity. With these enigmatic words, he left, leaving Marina with more questions than answers. The storm continued to rage through the night. Marina, unable to sleep, found herself wandering the darkened corridors of the mansion, guided only by the flickering light of the lantern. Without planning, her steps led her to the library. The door was ajar, a faint light visible inside. She hesitated, then gently pushed the door open. Augustus was there, sitting by the lit fireplace, the only source of light in the room now. He looked up as she entered, but didn't seem surprised. Can't sleep? He asked. Marina shook her head, approaching to sit in the armchair next to his. For a moment they watched the dancing flames together, the only sound besides the storm outside. Renwick told me about my father, she said finally. About the stories he's spreading. Augustus sighed. I was going to tell you. I didn't want to worry you. What exactly is he saying? That I keep you here against your will? That I brought you not to work but for... He didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. Marina felt a rising anger. And people believe that. Some do. It's easier to believe the worst about me than to accept that I might have changed. There was no self-pity in his voice, just a statement of fact. What happens now? Augustus studied her for a moment, his face partially illuminated by the fire, shadows dancing over his features. That depends on you, he said finally. I can take you back to the valley tomorrow if you wish. I will pay you enough to start over somewhere else with your siblings. Away from these rumors, this history. The offer surprised Marina. It was everything she thought she wanted when she arrived at that house months ago. Freedom, independence, a new beginning. Is that what you want? For me to leave? What I want and what's best for you might be different things. There was resignation in his voice. Marina reflected for a long moment. She thought of her siblings, of the valley, of the life she could build far from there. Then she thought of the man in front of her, complex, imperfect, carrying the weight of generations but genuinely seeking redemption. What if I don't want to go? She asked finally. His eyes met hers in the dim light. Then we have a bigger problem. Because the world out there won't easily accept whatever is happening between us. And what is happening between us, Augustus? He extended his hand, lightly touching her hand, a delicate, almost reverent gesture. Something I never expected to find at this point in my life. Something that makes me question everything I thought I knew about myself. The sincerity of those words struck her deeply. Marina intertwined her fingers with his. I won't let stories invented by a bitter man decide my fate, she said, with a firmness that surprised them both. Not now. Not when I'm finally discovering who I can be. A particularly loud thunderclap shook the mansion, as if the sky itself responded to her determination. Marina, there was a warning in his voice. The people who believe these stories have power. They can make our lives very difficult. More difficult than my life already was in the valley. More difficult than yours, carrying the weight of a name you didn't choose? She moved closer, her face now inches from his. I have lived according to the expectations and limits imposed by others for as long as I can remember. I won't let them continue to define who I am or what I can feel. His expression changed. Something like admiration and incredulity mingling in his gaze. You are extraordinary, he whispered. No. Marina smiled slightly. I'm just someone who finally found the right soil to bloom. Without another word, she closed the distance between them, kissing him with a certainty she didn't possess the first time. Her arms wrapped around him, pulling him closer. She felt his hands on her back, hesitant at first, then firmer, more possessive. When the kiss ended, they remained embraced, foreheads touching, breaths mingling in the air between them. If we stay together, he murmured, we'll have to face the entire valley. Then we will face it. Outside, the storm began to subside, the intervals between thunder becoming longer, the rain reducing to a constant yet softer, drumming against the windows. The rest of the night passed in whispered conversations by the fire. Cautious plans, long repressed confessions. They spoke of their fears, their hopes, the obstacles they knew would come. When dawn finally broke on the horizon, it found them asleep in the library armchairs, hands still joined, faces serene despite the storms, both real and metaphorical, they had faced. In the following weeks, a new routine was established. Marina continued her work in the archives, but now with a renewed purpose. Augustus's manuscript progressed, with her direct help now becoming not only an atonement for the past, but a bridge to the future. The siblings' Sunday visits took on new meaning. Augustus participated more actively, helping Sebastian with his homework, teaching Laura to ride a horse in the property's stables. To the children, oblivious to the complexities of the adult world, it was simply natural to see their sister and Uncle Augustus exchanging glances, secretly smiling at each other, occasionally holding hands when they thought no one was watching. It was Sebastian, with the peculiar perceptiveness of his 9 years, who verbalized the obvious during one of these Sundays. Are you two getting married? The question, asked while they ate ice cream on the veranda, caught them both off guard. Marina choked. Augustus suddenly became very interested in his napkin. Why do you ask that, Seb? Marina managed to say finally. The boy shrugged with the brutal sincerity of childhood. You look at each other like married people on TV, and Uncle Augustus smiles all the time now. Laura, who was swinging her legs in the high chair, nodded solemnly. And he gave you a pretty necklace. Marina instinctively touched the delicate pearl necklace around her neck, a gift Augustus had given her the week before, not for a special occasion, just because it matched her eyes. Augustus cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable with the turn of the conversation. What would you two think if, hypothetically, he hesitated, searching for the right words. If your sister and I decided to be together, officially? The children looked at each other as if consulting one another. Can we live here? Sebastian asked pragmatically. Of course, Augustus replied without hesitation. This house has too many rooms for one person. Can I bring my rock collection? The boy continued. And my doll? Laura added. All the rocks and all the dolls you want, Augustus assured, with a seriousness that made Marina smile. Then it's okay, Sebastian concluded, returning his attention to the melting ice cream. The simplicity of that acceptance contrasted sharply with the reaction they both knew they would face from the rest of the valley. But at that moment, under the late afternoon sun, with children's laughter filling the air, the world beyond the property walls seemed distant and irrelevant. That night, after the children had left with Renwick, who now religiously took and picked them up every Sunday, Marina and Augustus walked through the gardens, illuminated by lanterns strategically placed among the trees. About what Sebastian asked today, he began hesitantly. Marina smiled. Children say what they think unfiltered. Yes, but... Augustus stopped, turning to face her. It's not an absurd idea. Her heart quickened. What exactly? Us a shared future, not just furtive meetings in the library. He took her hands. Marina, I know there's a considerable difference between us. Age, origin, history. I know the entire valley would consider this inappropriate, scandalous. But in these months you've transformed my life. You've brought light to a house that for years knew only shadows. Marina felt an intense emotion rise in her throat. Augustus, I'm not asking for an answer now, he continued quickly. I just want you to know that for me this isn't a whim, a distraction. It's real. Perhaps the most real I've ever felt. Before Marina could respond, they heard the sound of tires on the gravel driveway. A car approached quickly, headlights cutting through the darkness. Strange, Augustus murmured, frowning. We're not expecting anyone tonight. They headed to the front of the house, where the vehicle, a luxurious dark sedan, had stopped. The driver's door opened, and Renwick emerged with an expression Marina had never seen on his face. Pure panic. What happened? Augustus hurried towards him. The children? They're fine, sir. I left them safely with Mrs. Eleanor, as arranged. Renwick seemed to be choosing his words carefully, looking significantly at Marina. But there's a situation in the village. I thought I should return immediately to warn you. What situation? Augustus's voice took on that commanding tone Marina rarely heard now. It's better we talk privately. Sir, whatever it is, Marina can hear. Renwick hesitated, then nodded resignedly. Mr. Arthur is at the police station, he said finally, filing a formal complaint against you for kidnapping and other crimes. Marina felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. What other crimes? Augustus asked, his voice dangerously calm. Renwick cast an apologetic glance at Marina before replying, He's alleging that you're keeping her here against her will, that you bought her for immoral purposes, and that you now refuse to return her to the family. A heavy silence fell upon them. Marina felt nauseous, a mix of anger and shame rising in her throat. My father doesn't want me back, she said finally. He wants more money. Yes, miss, Renwick agreed. But the problem is that the new chief inspector, recently transferred from the capital, is taking the accusation seriously. And there are journalists sent by the state newspaper. They're calling the case modern slavery. Augustus closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to control an inner storm. And my siblings? Marina asked, suddenly alarmed. If my father is doing this, for now they are safe with Mrs. Eleanor, Renwick assured. But if your father manages to convince the authorities, he won't, Augustus interrupted, his voice regaining its firmness. This accusation is absurd. Marina is here of her own free will. We can prove that. Marina wasn't so sure. She knew well how things worked in the valley. The truth didn't matter, perception did. The stories told, the prejudices reinforced. And the story of a powerful older man buying a poor girl from the village had all the elements to inflame public opinion, regardless of the facts. What do we do now? She asked, trying to stay calm. Augustus gently touched her arm, a gesture of solidarity that did not go unnoticed by Renwick. First, we keep you safe here. Then I consult my lawyers. His voice was firm, but his eyes betrayed concern. "I will not allow your father to use you as a pawn in some sordid game for money." That night, while Augustus made calls in his office, Marina remained in the library, sitting by the same window where he used to stand, watching the distant lights of the valley, the lights of a place she once called home, and which now became a threat. The irony was not lost on her. She had arrived at this house as an involuntary prisoner, sold by her own father. Now, when she had finally found freedom, the true freedom that comes from respect, trust, and yes, love, that same man was trying to drag her back into the shadows. "I won't go back," she whispered to herself, a promise made to her. Reflection in the dark glass. Not this time. The approaching storm, however, would be harder to face than any of the summer rains that had already fallen over the valley, and its lightning threatened not only her future with Augustus, but everything they had both built in the months they spent together: trust, respect, and the belief that it was possible to break the cycles of the past. The news spread through the valley like wildfire. The next morning, local newspapers ran sensational headlines. Valley colonel accused of holding young woman captive. Forbidden romance or kidnapping. The mystery of the mansion on the hill. Family demands justice and return of daughter, sold for debt. Some reports went so far as to compare the case to historical tragedies of slavery. Augustus received the newspapers in silence. At the breakfast they now regularly shared on the veranda, Marina watched his face harden as he flipped through the pages. "They know nothing about us," she said, trying to reassure him. "They don't need to know," he replied, folding the newspaper methodically. "The truth has never been as tasty as gossip, especially when it involves the Maxwells." There was bitterness in his voice, the resignation of one who already expected such treatment. Marina felt anger growing in her chest, not for herself, but for him. For this man who struggled to redeem himself from sins that weren't even entirely his own, who carried the burden of previous generations. "I'm going to the police station," she declared suddenly. "I'll undo these lies. Tell the truth." Augustus looked up, alarmed. "No, that's exactly what your father wants, to lure you out of this property where my influence can protect you. I can't hide here forever, and I won't allow you to be defamed this way." At that moment, Renwick appeared at the door, his rigid posture indicating he brought more news. "Sir, Dr. Thompson is on the phone. Says it's urgent." Dr. Thompson had been the Maxwell family lawyer for decades. Augustus immediately stood up, heading to the office to take the call. Marina followed him, determined not to be excluded from discussions that directly affected her future. The phone conversation was brief but clarifying. The lawyer explained that the situation was more complicated than it seemed. Mr. Arthur had found unexpected allies, the town's mayor, with whom Augustus had an old rivalry, and a newly arrived prosecutor, eager to make a name for himself. "They want a search warrant," Augustus said after hanging up. "To rescue you." Marina felt her blood run cold. "They can't do that. I'm an adult. I'm here by my own choice. The accusation is that you are coerced, that you have Stockholm Syndrome." There was incredulity in his voice. "Your father claimed you were conditioned to accept your situation." Marina let out a bitter laugh. "The man who sold me for £50,000 now cares about my psychological well-being. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous but effective." Augustus ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of nervousness. "Dr. Thompson recommends you leave the property temporarily. Go to London, perhaps, until we can resolve this legally." "No." Her answer was immediate, categorical. "I won't run. Not this time. Not again." Augustus approached, touching her face gently. "Marina, it's not running. It's strategy. It's exactly what my mother did," she replied, pulling away. "She left to sort things out and never came back. She left me behind with my siblings. With him." Her voice trembled slightly. "I won't do the same. I won't abandon my siblings or you." Before Augustus could argue, the phone rang again. Renwick answered, then came to inform them. "It's Chief Inspector Foster, sir. He wishes to speak with Miss Marina personally." Augustus and Marina exchanged apprehensive glances. Then, with determination, she reached for the phone. "Hello?" Her voice came out firmer than she expected. "Miss Ribeiro?" The voice on the other end was deep, professional. "This is Chief Inspector Charles Foster. I'm calling to check on your well-being." "I am perfectly well, Chief Inspector. And I am here of my own free will. There was a pause on the other end of the line, I understand. Nevertheless, I would like you to come to the police station to provide clarification. Your father has made serious accusations. My father sold me, Marina replied without mincing words. Like merchandise, and now that he realized he could have gotten more money, he's trying to use me again. Another pause, longer this time. These are serious accusations too, miss. All the more reason for us to speak officially. The chief inspector's voice softened slightly. I promise you will be treated with all due respect. I just need to hear your version of events outside the influence of the Colonel Maxwell. Marina perceived the insinuation. The chief inspector, like so many others, presumed she couldn't speak freely in Augustus's presence. I will come tomorrow, she decided, ignoring Augustus's alarmed look. But on one condition, I want assurances that I will not be forced to go anywhere against my will. You have my word, the chief inspector replied. 9 o'clock is good for you? I'll be there. When she hung up, Augustus looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. Are you sure about this? Absolutely, Marina held his hands. It's time to face the valley head-on, not as the girl sold by her father, but as the woman I chose to be. That afternoon they devised a careful plan. Dr. Thompson would come in the morning to accompany her to the police station. Renwick would discreetly check if any trap was being set. And Marina would write a detailed statement, recounting the whole truth, from the initial sale to recent events. There's one more thing, Augustus said, as they reviewed the details. Something I should have done a long time ago. He left briefly, returning with a folder of documents. What's this? Marina asked. The deed to the house where your siblings live, transferred to their names, in a trust fund until they reach adulthood, and documents guaranteeing their education up to university. Marina looked at the papers, stunned. When did you do this? 2 weeks ago. There was almost shyness in his voice. I wanted to surprise you when the time was right, so you would know that regardless of what happened between us, your siblings would be protected, that you would never again have to sacrifice yourself for them. Emotion overcame her so suddenly that she couldn't hold back the tears. It was a gesture that went beyond money, beyond material generosity. It was a deep understanding of what truly mattered to her, of the weight she had carried since childhood. Augustus, her voice failed. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she cried, not from sadness but from relief, from gratitude, from a love that had grown so unexpectedly between them. We'll get through this, he whispered into her hair. Together. The night was restless for both of them. Lying side by side in the bed they now shared, they talked late into the night, preparing for all possible scenarios for the next day. What if they try to arrest me? Augustus asked, verbalizing the fear that tormented him. They have no legal basis for it. Dr. Thompson guaranteed that. The legal system doesn't always work based on the law, Marina. Not when there's power and money involved. She propped herself up on her elbow to look at him in the dim light of the room. You're afraid. It wasn't a question. Yes. The admission came easily, without wounded pride. Not for myself. For you. For us. Marina touched his face, feeling the roughness of the beard that was starting to grow. The Colonel Maxwell feared throughout the valley, afraid. There was gentle teasing in her voice. Who would have thought? A reluctant smile appeared on his lips. The Colonel fears nothing. Augustus, on the other hand, she kissed him softly, interrupting him. Augustus is the man I love, and for him, I will face any chief inspector, prosecutor, or entire town. They fell asleep like that, intertwined, finding momentary refuge in each other against the approaching storm. The morning arrived clear and cold, with that crystalline luminosity, typical of winter in the countryside. Marina dressed with deliberate care, a simple but elegant dress, the pearl necklace Augustus had given her, her hair tied in a discreet bun. She wanted to appear exactly what she was, an adult woman, confident in her choices, not a helpless victim. Augustus insisted on accompanying her to the police station, despite Dr. Thompson's contrary advice. My presence might harm your credibility, he argued. They might say you're under pressure, or they might see that I don't hide behind walls and lawyers, Marina countered, that we face this together, openly. The drive to town was tense. As they approached the center, they noticed curious glances, discreet pointing. The news had spread. They were now the main topic in all conversations in the valley. The police station was a modest building in the central square. As they parked, Marina saw with disgust that a small group of reporters was waiting, some local, others clearly from the capital, with professional equipment. "Ready?" Augustus asked, turning off the engine. She nodded, taking a deep breath. The moment they stepped out of the car, they were surrounded. Flashes fired. Questions were hurled simultaneously. "Miss Ribeiro, are you here against your will?" "Colonel, how do you respond to accusations of unlawful detention? Is it true she was bought to settle a debt?" Marina felt momentarily disoriented by the assault. Then Augustus's firm hand found hers, and she regained her focus. "No comment," Augustus said, with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding. "My lawyer will speak at the appropriate time." They managed to make their way to the police station entrance, where an officer waited to escort them inside. The interior was simple, functional. They were led directly to a back room, where Chief Inspector Foster awaited them. He was a middle-aged man with a military bearing and keen eyes. Beside him was a young man Marina recognized as the new district prosecutor, Prosecutor Paul Miller, recently arrived from the capital, with a reputation for being ambitious and incorruptible. And sitting in a corner, looking simultaneously triumphant and uncomfortable, was her father. Marina's heart raced upon seeing him. Mr. Arthur seemed to have aged years since she last saw him, thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes, his face marked by alcohol and resentment. For a brief moment she felt a pang of pity. "Miss Ribeiro," the chief inspector stood up, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." "Marina," she corrected, accepting the greeting. "Marina Ribeiro." "Yes, of course. Please sit down." "Colonel Maxwell, if you could wait in the reception area." "I prefer he stays," Marina interrupted. The chief inspector and the prosecutor exchanged glances. "Miss Marina," the prosecutor began, his voice calibrated to convey understanding. "We understand you might feel constrained to say certain things in his presence." "I do not feel constrained," her voice was firm. "And I would like to start by clarifying something. I am here voluntarily. I have always been on Mr. Maxwell's property voluntarily, and any suggestion to the contrary is false." Her father let out a scoff. "Voluntarily, after being sold like an animal." Marina turned to face him directly. "Yes, father, after being sold by you." She kept her voice calm, but her hands trembled slightly. "For £50,000 and the cancellation of a debt. Your exact words were, 'more than you're worth.'" The chief inspector frowned, looking from Marina to Mr. Arthur. "Mr. Arthur, do you admit to having negotiated your daughter?" Mr. Arthur seemed momentarily disconcerted. He clearly didn't expect Marina to be so direct. It was an agreement. To work, to settle the debt. He cast a venomous look at Augustus. "He's the one who turned it into something else, abusing the situation." "That's absurd," interjected Dr. Thompson, who had been observing silently until then. "My client offered Miss Ribeiro legitimate employment as an archivist and personal assistant, with adequate payment, accommodations, and complete freedom to leave whenever she wished." "Then why didn't she leave?" the prosecutor challenged, looking directly at Marina. "If she had this complete freedom?" Marina held his gaze. "Initially because I feared for my siblings' well-being, then because the work was interesting and well paid." She paused significantly. "And eventually because I fell in love." A heavy silence fell upon the room. Mr. Arthur let out a bitter laugh. "Fell in love? With the colonel? He's old enough to be your father, girl." "I am an adult," Marina replied with dignity. "My emotional choices are not subject to anyone's approval, especially not from someone who treated me as merchandise." Chief Inspector Foster scratched his chin, visibly uncomfortable with the family scene unfolding in his office. "Miss Marina, I understand your position, but please understand ours. We have received serious allegations. We have a duty to investigate." "Of course," she assented, "and I came precisely to clarify everything. I am willing to give a formal statement, sign declarations, whatever is necessary to end this circus." "Circus?" Her father stood up abruptly. He enchanted her. "The same thing he did to others before. Do you think you're special? That you're the first?" Helen also thought she was until he destroyed her. Marina felt Augustus stiffen beside her. The mention of Helen, his deceased wife, had clearly hit a sensitive spot. "Mr. Arthur," the chief inspector warned, "maintain your composure or you will be removed." "Ask him about Helen," Mr. Arthur insisted, pointing accusingly at Augustus. "Ask him how she really died." Dr. Thompson stood up. "This is defamation. Mrs. Helen Maxwell passed away from cancer, as attested by renowned doctors. I demand that these unfounded accusations be removed from the record." The prosecutor, who had been observing with clinical interest until then, intervened. "Let's stick to the current facts, please. Miss Marina, at any point did you feel coerced, threatened, or restricted by Mr. Maxwell?" "Never." Her answer was immediate. "On the contrary, he has always respected my decisions, my boundaries. He is an honorable man." Mr. Arthur snorted but said nothing. "And your siblings?" The prosecutor continued. "Were there any veiled threats involving them?" "My siblings visit me regularly. They are well cared for. In fact," she hesitated, looking at Augustus, who nodded encouragingly, "Mr. Maxwell transferred ownership of the house where they live to their names and secured funds for their education, with no conditions, no demands." This revelation seemed to surprise everyone in the room. The chief inspector and the prosecutor exchanged meaningful glances. Mr. Arthur visibly paled. How so?" he stammered. "The house is no longer yours, Father," Marina replied without satisfaction, just stating a fact. "You can no longer sell it, mortgage it, or lose it gambling. It belongs to Sebastian and Laura in a trust fund." Mr. Arthur's face transformed into a mask of fury. "So that's it? He buys not only you but my children too?" "My house? Your children whom you barely visit. Your house that you almost lost countless times." Marina's voice remained calm, but there was a new firmness in it. "He bought nothing. He protected those you should have protected." Chief Inspector Foster cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable with the family scene unfolding in his office. "Well, I believe we have enough material to—" He was interrupted by a commotion from the reception area. The door opened abruptly and Renwick entered, accompanied by two small figures Marina recognized immediately, Sebastian and Laura. "What is this?" The chief inspector stood up. "Who authorized children to enter?" "Excuse me, Chief Inspector," Renwick said with a formality that didn't match the determined glint in his eyes. "But these young people insisted on coming. They said they have relevant information for the case." Marina stood up, alarmed. "Seb, Laura, what are you doing here?" Sebastian stepped forward, with that peculiar courage of his 9 years. He seemed nervous but resolute. "We came to tell the truth," he declared, looking directly at the chief inspector. "About our sister and Uncle Augustus." The prosecutor surprisingly smiled. "And what is the truth, young man?" "That they really like each other, that we visit every Sunday, that Marina is happy there." Sebastian spoke quickly as if afraid of losing his courage. "And that our father is lying because he wants money." Mr. Arthur lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "Shut up, brat! Who taught you to talk like that?" The abrupt movement scared Laura, who hid behind Renwick. Her small face twisted in fear. "He hits us," she said almost inaudibly. "When he drinks." A chilling silence descended upon the room. Chief Inspector Foster looked at the little girl, then at Mr. Arthur, his expression hardening. "Mr. Arthur, I suggest you calm down. Immediately." Marina felt as if her heart would burst. The confirmation of what she had always suspected, that her father's violence was not limited to words, was devastating. Augustus placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of support. Prosecutor Miller cleared his throat, reclaiming everyone's attention. "Well, it seems this case has taken an unexpected turn." He looked at Marina seriously. "Miss, we will still need your formal statement. And there will be follow-up with the minors by social workers. But given what we witnessed today," he hesitated, "my priorities have shifted significantly." Leaving the police station was as tumultuous as their arrival. The reporters still waited, eager for any fragment of information. This time, however, Marina deliberately stopped in front of them. "I have a brief statement," she said with a firmness that surprised everyone, including herself. "I am on Mr. Augustus Maxwell's property by free choice. I work as his assistant and archivist. And yes, we have developed a personal relationship as two free and consenting adults. Any insinuation to the contrary is not only false but defamatory." She paused, then continued. "As for my father's allegations, I leave it to justice to judge his motivations. At the moment, my only concern is the well-being of my younger siblings." A reporter raised a hand. "And what about the stories about the colonel? About his history with women?" Marina felt Augustus tense beside her, but she replied without hesitation. "The man I have come to know is honorable, compassionate, and respectful. If there were others before him with other behaviors, I cannot judge. I can only speak of the present we are building together." With that, she got into the car, followed by Augustus and the children. The reporters continued shouting questions, but Renwick was already closing the doors, shielding them from the invasion. The drive back to the mansion passed in reflective silence. Sebastian and Laura, exhausted by the emotional tension, fell asleep in the back seats. Marina looked out the window, processing everything that had happened. "You were extraordinary," Augustus said finally, his voice low so as not to wake the children. "In there, with the press, with your father." Marina turned to him, studying his profile against the evening light. "I think we all were." "Including them," she indicated the sleeping little ones. "So brave. They have someone to take after." Augustus briefly touched her hand, a gesture of contained affection. "What happened today? It changed everything, didn't it?" She nodded, understanding. The complaint against her father, the revelation of the abuse against her siblings, her public declaration about her relationship with Augustus, all of it irrevocably altered the landscape. "We can't go back," she said. "Not as a lament, but as a statement of fact. Do you regret it? Coming to the police station? Speaking to the press?" Marina reflected for a moment. No, it was time to break the silence. "To own our story," she smiled slightly. "Even if the entire valley talks about us for years." "They will," he confirmed with a half-smile. "The Maxwells always give people something to talk about." When they arrived at the mansion, the sun was already setting on the horizon. Helga awaited anxiously at the entrance, having been informed by phone about the events at the police station. With silent efficiency, she led the children to the room that was already permanently prepared for their visits. "They'll stay here tonight," Marina decided. "I don't want them to go back to the house, even with Mrs. Eleanor, until we're sure my father won't be released." Augustus agreed. "I'll ask Dr. Thompson to follow the case closely, and tomorrow we'll start the procedures to obtain legal guardianship." The reality of that sentence suddenly hit Marina. Legal guardianship. A formal responsibility for her siblings. A real family, not just temporary arrangements. "And do you really want this?" she asked when they were alone in the library. "Children running through the corridors of this old house. The noise, the mess, the responsibility." Augustus poured 2 glasses of wine, handing her one. "This house has seen too much silence, too much loneliness." He approached, touching her face with a gentleness that still surprised her. "Besides, it wouldn't be the first time the Maxwell mansion housed an unconventional family." "Unconventional how?" He smiled. "In the 1920s, my great-grandfather housed an actress here who scandalized the valley. They had 2 children, never officially married. She eventually left him, but the children remained. One of them was my grandfather." Marina couldn't help but laugh. "So rebellion runs in the Maxwell blood?" "Apparently," he gently clinked glasses with her, "though I prefer to call it independence of spirit." That night, after the children finally fell asleep, exhausted by the unexpected adventure, Marina and Augustus found themselves on the veranda overlooking the valley. The distant town lights looked like earthly stars, shining against the black velvet of the night. "What happens now?" she asked, leaning back against his chest, feeling his arms embrace her. "The legal process will run its course. Your father will likely face charges. Social workers will investigate, talk to the children." He rested his chin on her head. "And we will move forward one day at a time. The valley will never forget. We'll always be that scandal." "Probably," there was amused resignation in his voice. "The Maxwells have given people something to talk about for generations. Why would it be any different now?" Marina turned in his arms to face him. "Because this time the story isn't about power, domination, or tragedy. It's about choice. About true freedom." Augustus smiled, that rare smile that completely transformed his austere face. "About blooming in the right soil?" Exactly. She touched his face, tracing the lines that years and worries had drawn, and about a new beginning for the Maxwell lineage. The following weeks brought rapid and significant changes. Mr. Arthur remained detained, as investigations confirmed Sebastian and Laura's accounts. Witnesses emerged. Neighbors who had seen the children with marks heard screams, but maintained the traditional silence of the countryside. With the help of the best lawyers, Marina obtained provisional guardianship of her siblings. The judge, impressed by the conditions offered at the Maxwell mansion and the children's evident love for Marina and Augustus, granted authorization without hesitation. The press, initially eager for scandals, gradually lost interest as the real story emerged. Some outlets even published discreet retractions, acknowledging the initial false accusations. Others found more positive angles: the redemption of a powerful man through love, the courage of a young woman who faced the system to protect her siblings. In the valley, reactions were mixed. Some, especially the older ones, still murmured about impropriety, the age difference, the buying of a young wife. Others, especially after the truth about Mr. Arthur came to light, saw the story with new eyes as a rescue, a second chance, a fresh start for all involved. The mansion, once a place of silence and shadows, gradually transformed. The vacant rooms came to life, one for Sebastian, decorated with maps and adventure books, another for Laura, with pink tones and a meticulously restored dollhouse that had belonged to Augustus's grandmother. The library, once the Colonel's exclusive sanctuary, now frequently hosted read-aloud sessions, with the children nestled on cushions on the floor. Renwick, surprisingly, revealed himself to be a natural storyteller, entertaining the little ones with valley legends he had learned in his own childhood. Helga, initially rigid, completely melted at Laura's clumsy attempts to help her bake cookies. And Augustus's manuscript, the book that started everything, gained new chapters. Not just about the Maxwells' past, but about the present and the future they were now building together. One spring afternoon, almost 6 months after the events at the police station, Marina found herself in the garden, supervising the children as they tried to build a treehouse, a project approved and discreetly assisted by Augustus, who pretended not to be as involved as he really was. Renwick approached, holding official correspondence. "From the court, miss," he said, handing her the envelope. Marina opened it with slightly trembling fingers. It was the final decision on her siblings' guardianship. Her eyes quickly scanned the document, then filled with tears. "Permanent guardianship," she whispered. "Granted." Augustus, who was watching closely, smiled openly, that smile which months ago she would have found impossible on the Colonel's austere face. "I never doubted it," he said, approaching to hug her. That night, after the children were asleep, exhausted by the day's excitement, Marina and Augustus sat in the library, as so many times before. But there was something different in the air, an expectation, a silent decision that had matured between them. "I finished the last part of the manuscript today," Augustus commented, pouring them wine. "The book is complete," Marina smiled. They had worked together on that project for so long that it felt strange to imagine its end. "May I read it?" "Of course," he hesitated. "But there's something I'd like to discuss first." There was an unusual intensity in his gaze that made Marina place her wine glass on the table, anticipating something significant. "What is it?" Augustus took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "These months have transformed my life in ways I never imagined possible. You, the children, you've brought light to a house that knew only shadows for decades." Marina felt her heart quicken. "Augustus, let me finish, please." He smiled nervously. "I am not a young man. I carry a name that for generations inspired fear and resentment in the valley. But with you, for the first time, I feel I can be more than my past, more than my name." He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "What I'm trying to say, clumsily, is that I want to make this official. Not just because of the comments in the valley, not just for the children, but for us." Marina felt tears forming, blurring her vision. "Are you asking me to marry you? I am asking you to allow me to break the last cycle of the Maxwells, that of marriages, of convenience, of appearance, of duty." His eyes were extraordinarily vulnerable. "I am asking you to be my wife because we chose each other, freely, against all expectations." Marina couldn't contain the smile that lit up her face. "I always imagined that if I ever married, it would be someone predictable, safe, my age, from my world." She squeezed his hands in hers. "And here I am in love with the most improbable man, building a family in the most unexpected way. Is that a yes?" The hesitation in his voice was almost palpable. "It's an absolutely yes," she replied, leaning in to kiss him. The news of the engagement between the Colonel Augustus Maxwell and Marina Ribeiro spread through the valley like wildfire. This time, however, the whispers had a different tone, less of scandal, more of curiosity, perhaps even a touch of reluctant romance. The wedding, held 3 months later in the property's chapel, was small, intimate. Sebastian, proudly dressed in his first suit, walked his sister down the improvised aisle between the rows of chairs. Laura, radiant like a tiny fairy, scattered flower petals along the path. Renwick, serving as best man, maintained his usual formality, betrayed only by the suspicious glint of emotion in his eyes. Among the few guests were people who had witnessed the transformation: Dr. Thompson and his wife, Mrs. Eleanor, who now served as the children's tutor, some long-time estate employees who had seen young Augustus grow up and become the feared colonel, and now witnessed his final metamorphosis. The vows, written by both, spoke not of conventional love or a fairy tale, but of a shared journey. Conscious choices, redemption, and new beginnings. They spoke of flowers finally finding the right soil to bloom, of old cycles finally broken. When the justice of the peace declared them husband and wife, there was a moment when time seemed suspended, as if the universe recognized the improbability of that moment, the confluence of circumstances that had brought two such different people to this point of union. The party that followed was simple but joyful. The children ran through the gardens, illuminated by lanterns. Helga, to everyone's surprise, revealed culinary talents that went far beyond the usual formality of the mansion's meals. Local musicians brought guitars and accordions, filling the night with traditional countryside melodies. Late that night, when most of the guests had left and the children were asleep, exhausted, Marina found Augustus in the library, the place where everything had truly begun between them. He stood by the fireplace, watching the flames with a contemplative expression, an untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. "What are you thinking about, Mr. Maxwell?" she asked, approaching silently. He turned, smiling upon seeing her still in her wedding dress, simple, elegant without ostentation. "About cycles, Mrs. Maxwell." There was evident pleasure in the way he pronounced the title. "About how we got here against all odds." Marina approached, wrapping her arms around his waist. Who would have thought the girl sold for £50,000 would end up as the mistress of the mansion on the hill? There was humor in her voice, but also a deep understanding of the extraordinary path they had traveled. "You're not just the mistress of the mansion," Augustus corrected, touching her face with reverence. "You are the woman I chose, who chose me back. The first Maxwell in generations to enter this family out of true love, not by arrangement, convenience, or imposition." Marina felt the weight of that statement, the meaning that transcended their individual lives, reaching past and future generations. "Is the book really finished?" she asked, referring to the manuscript that had started their journey together. "The book about the Maxwells' past, yes." He pulled her closer. "But ours? We've just started the first chapter." Outside, the valley stretched beneath the night sky, dotted with lights like earthly stars. The same valley that had witnessed generations of Maxwells wielding power through fear, intimidation, possession. The same valley that had seen Marina grow like a stubborn flower in arid soil, determined to protect those she loved at all costs. Now, that valley would bear witness to something new. A family built not on transactions or debts, but on free and conscious choices. A new cycle beginning where the old ones, finally, had been broken. "To the future," Augustus proposed, raising his glass. "To the future," Marina agreed, sealing the toast with a kiss. And as the last flame in the fireplace crackled, casting dancing shadows across the library walls, they remained embraced, the improbable couple of the mansion on the hill, who had defied conventions, overcome prejudices, and, against all expectations, found not only love, but redemption in each other. In the valley, stories about the Maxwells would continue to be told for generations. But now, among the legends of power and intimidation, there would be a new narrative, that of the young woman who was sold as merchandise, but found herself invaluable, and of the man who, seeking to exorcise the ghosts of the past, found a future he had never dared to imagine. Together they rewrote not only their own stories, but the legacy of a name that for too long had been synonymous with fear. They transformed it into a symbol that even the bitterest roots can, with time and the right soil, produce extraordinary flowers.